My name is Father Charlie Goraieb, and I'm going to begin today with a three-part series on the Dolors of Mary. Perhaps you've never heard that term. Dolors is simply a Latin term for the wounds or the pains of Mary. That's why we say Mary Dolorosa, the Via Dolorosa, having to do with pain. The fathers of the church have all traditionally talked about the wounds, the 7 last words of Jesus from the cross. But what parallels that in another way are the 7 wounds that Mary bore throughout her whole life, called the Dolors of Mary. And so I want to be able to share a few of those with you, maybe give some brief reflections on those different dolors. I hope you find this to be interesting because it reflects the wisdom of the church over reflecting on our Blessed Mother. So Mary was pierced 7 times with swords of sorrow. And these are what constitute her 7 dolors. Hence the name, you've seen it, Our Lady of Sorrows. Now, Jesus and his mission are the sword of Mary's suffering and passion. So God permitted Mary to share to experience in her sorrows what Jesus would in his. And she was able to participate in the sorrows of the Redeemer, not to the full extent, only to the extent that a human being could. But she was at his passion and was there at his death and understood exactly what he was going through, his suffering. An unsuffering Christ who ignored sin would be reduced to the level of an ethical reformer like Buddha or Confucius. And a mother who did not participate in the sufferings of her son would be a loveless Madonna. As the Lord learned obedience by which he suffered, so Mary had to learn motherhood of the Redeemer, not by appointment, but by experience, with the burdens of the human experience of the heart. What are the 7 thrusts of the sword of Mary, the 7 dolors? Traditionally, they're divided into this list. The first one is Simians Prophecy, then the flight into Egypt, the 3 days loss, meeting Jesus with his cross, the crucifixion, the taking down from the cross, and the burial of Jesus. So in this reflection and the subsequent 2 episodes, we're going to reflect on these dolors just a bit, just to see how it is that Mary experienced those and maybe relate those to our own experience somehow. So the first one is Simian's prophecy, that when he said to her, when she brought the child to be circumcised, "Thine own soul, O sword, thy soul shall pierce." Know that Simeon did not say that the sword would pierce her body, her virginal body would indeed be spared an outer assault, but that Mary would experience a wound in her soul. A mother revealed to me recently that the doctors have diagnosed her son with a severe heart problem. At the moment, it wasn't fatal. But the doctors have warned the parents that at any moment that could just escalate and it could be a fatal heart attack that this child would have. Medications can help, but there's no way and no guarantee that in the midst of some ordinary child behavior and play that her son's heart could just fatally give out and burst, and that child would of course die. So imagine how these parents feel, knowing that there's nothing they can do to prevent their child from this fate, but they have to carry it in their heart. They have to do all they can to care for him, but there's nothing they can do to prevent this tragedy. In many ways, this is how Mary felt. She was told in advance and that she would experience this dolor, that despite her dialogue with Gabriel and all that went on with her virginal conception, she did not have perfect knowledge of who her son was or what this prophecy by Simeon could have meant. She knew to some degree. We can't say Mary did not have any knowledge, but she didn't have perfect knowledge. That was to come later. Simeon's was a 2-edged sword. One edge was the revelation to Mary that her son was to be a victim for sin. The other edge was knowing that she would be a trustee of his life until the hour of sacrifice. Her experience only reinforces the truth that if you belong to the Lord, and walk as his disciple, you will incur the enmity of the world. Jesus came to bring the sword, and his mother was the first to experience it, to feel this sword. How do we accept bad news? Do we worry and excessively over what might happen, or do we place our trust in the Lord? Do we give to Jesus our full trust? Do we have confidence and hope that God will intervene and help us when we need it? That's the first dolor. The second dolor of Mary is the exile into Egypt. Now we know that both of the parents were these parents were very, very concerned when from the revelation that came to Joseph in the dream, that they needed to take the child out of Israel because Herod wanted to kill his children. My parents had a similar experience. My father was an immigrant from Lebanon because of the persecution of the Muslims. This was back at the beginning of the 20th century. So I have a kind of a personal experience of this. When my father was 14, he left Lebanon and went to Egypt and boarded a boat to Mexico, where he joined his brothers and sisters because of the persecution of the Muslims. So because of their flight into Egypt to escape the wicked and mad, paranoid King Herod, Mary can be a comfort and hope to all who are exiles and displaced refugees in the world. Here we see two swords, one wielded by Herod, who would kill the Prince of Peace in order to have the false peace of his reign of power, which was evanescent, fleeting. The other, the sword himself, who would have his own mother see the Exodus reversed. Just as the Jews left Egypt for the Holy Land, so the Exodus is reversed, where Mary and Joseph and Jesus go back to Egypt, the land of slavery and captivity. By leaving her country and home and carrying Jesus to Egypt, as a priest would carry the Blessed Sacrament, Mary could begin to understand Simians' prophecy that a sword would pierce her heart, and that her son was going to suffer, and that she would suffer with him. The world hated Jesus and wanted to kill him. So Jesus tells us, as they have hated me, so will they hate you as well. Today, this holds true as it was then. Many have banished the Savior from their hearts. They spend most of their time flying away, fleeing from Jesus. This pain that Mary suffered is repeated today by the many who reject her son Jesus. The effects of sin are not only conquered by self-indulgence in the flesh, but by love which masters fear, and by penance which arrests flight and fear. When the heart of man is not at home in Nazareth, but an escape from reality, there is still hope. If he turns to the Madonna and her child, they will meet him even in the wild flight to the deserts of this world.